Aubrey, we are continuing a bit of a series. We've been talking about organizing your part two answer, and we gave you a model a couple episodes back, 1488, describing a person. And today we're going to continue these lessons.
Yes, because today we're sharing part two questions that you might not think would work for a story. Like, how do I tell a story about this? We're going to show you how and how it is easier to fill 2 minutes, even with these type of questions, with
Yeah.
a good story.
Awesome. So let's get to these model answers. Aubrey's going to do the first one, and this is her prompt. Describe your favorite piece of clothing.
Oh, I thought you were
Okay.
going to do that one, Jessica. I have an idea for the second one.
Oh,
Could
I
you
was
do the
gonna do that
clothing?
one. I'm doing this
Yes.
one.
Let me get my timer. I'm gonna have you answer this one because I have not. Listen out there, guys. You might be like me, and this would be a really hard question because I don't have a favorite piece of clothing. So let's see how Jessica does.
All right, let's do it.
All right, you may begin now, please.
So my favorite piece of clothing that I own in the world right now is a fur coat. Now, I'm not someone who would ever really nobody would think I would have a fur coat, but I wear this thing every day. First of all, because it's freezing here, and second of all, because it's so dang cool. I get compliments on this coat every time I wear it. No joke. And you know what? It's actually real fur. Now, I didn't buy it. It was actually free, and I make sure to tell everybody that compliments me that it was free. This is a crazy story. I actually got this at a clothing exchange. So, my neighbor Jamie, she organized a clothing exchange where, like, she invited 10 people, and we all brought a bunch of clothes that we don't wear anymore. And the idea was like, we're just gonna have all of these clothes to choose from, and we could try stuff on and, make funny outfits and stuff. But basically, you just show up and you get to choose from a lot of cool clothes. And this fur coat was one of them. And I was surprised to even see it there. It didn't fit in this clothing exchange because everyone there is, well, I think half of them were vegans, honestly. And I was like, who brought the fur coat, you guys? And is this really sweet woman who loves going to the Goodwill bins. And she goes there every week. And if you don't know what that is, the Goodwill bins is like this huge warehouse that everything goes to that doesn't get sold at the Goodwills. And you pay for clothes like by the pound, and it's so cheap. And she just grabs stuff that she doesn't even want. She just thinks like, oh, like this is interesting. Maybe I can find a use for this. So she's the one that brought the fur coat. Um, and I don't think
Thank you.
anyone okay.
Do you still wear that fur coat?
I do. I wear it like all the time.
That's amazing. I intentionally asked Jessica a follow-up question because you're going to get one, right? After your part two question, you get this little follow-up question that's sort of a transition to part three. And Jessica's answer was perfect, right? Make it short. I have so much good feedback here. That was an amazing answer. Starting with, I loved the way you said my favorite piece of clothing. And if you guys were thinking like, uh-oh, vocab repetition. No, this is a good way to do that, right? You don't want to do that with every word, but it's a fun way to emphasize. Instead of saying my very favorite, we'll do this. We'll say my favorite piece of clothing. And that's very fun. And then when Jessica said, I'm not someone who would, and she immediately paraphrased because whatever word you were looking for was not top of mind, was not at the tip of your tongue. This happens to you guys a lot on part two. I want you to go back and listen to how she did it. She sort of just interrupted that sentence and then said, nobody would think I'd wear something like this, instead of coming up with that other exact way to say it. This is a skill you have to practice, paraphrasing, saying it another way instead of pausing and thinking for that perfect word. So well done on that.
I was going to say I'm not one who would normally wear a fur coat. And then I thought, well, that's just false because I'm literally telling you I wear it.
Perfect. Which, of course, you could finish that sentence and be like, okay, actually, that's a lie because I wear it. Like lots of options here, but the way you did
Sure.
it was just such great. If you guys can do that, it really shows your fluency when you can interrupt a thought, rephrase it, and just keep on going without letting it throw you off. But I
Awesome.
have more great vocab. I loved where you said, no joke. right? You're saying something that someone might doubt. And this is a great thing to say. It's very slangy, very informal to be like, no joke, meaning like, you need to believe me. This is actually true. And then to introduce the story, you said, this is a crazy story. And that's a great way to jump into an interesting story. And then again, a ton of great transition phrases. So, as a party where, and then you share some details about it. The idea was, and then you share details. What was the idea for the party? So, great opening up with a story to give you the opportunity to share all these interesting details besides just describing the coat.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so there's a part 2 strategy we've talked about before, during, after, right? So, like, what were you doing before you got the coat? What was happening while you got the coat? What happened after you got the coat? And without meaning to, I kind of followed that strategy.
Awesome. Well done. I'm excited for my answer.
All right. So now it's Aubrey's turn. Aubrey is going to describe a present you gave someone. Can you start speaking now, please?
There was a really funny thing that happened several years ago when Apple Watches first came out. My husband had told me he would like one for Christmas. So I went to the Apple store, and the first employee I saw, I said, kind sir, can you please get me an Apple Watch? It doesn't matter what. He's probably going to come and trade it in for what he actually wants. So can I just buy one? I wasn't worried about it. He pulled one from the back and gave me the thing, and I signed it without even looking at the cost because I knew I didn't know what features he wanted. I didn't know anything, and I just wrapped it and put it under the tree. And Christmas morning comes, and my husband opened this little gift, and a look of shock passed over his face because I guess this Apple Watch was maybe $2,000. It was some kind of gold plated platinum titanium. I don't know, but was more expensive than the average Apple Watch. And he asked, how much did you spend on this? And I said, oh, I don't know. I didn't look at it. I figured you could trade it in for the one you want. I don't know anything about them. And he started laughing and said, I was expecting one that was much cheaper, a couple $100 maybe. And so then we went and looked at the credit card receipt and were dumbfounded by how expensive it was. And he was so shocked that I hadn't even looked when I signed. But, that's me. What do I care? And what was really funny was about 30 minutes prior, I had opened a gift from him, an Apple Watch, and was grateful, like, oh, good. I hope you don't mind if I traded in for the one I would actually like. And he knew I would be similar,
Thank
that I
you.
would prefer to
Thank
choose
you.
my own.
Did you tell other people about this present?
Oh, yes, I tell this story all the time.
Okay, awesome. Oh my god, that was hilarious. I was that true?
Yes, that did happen. The only thing I left out was, like, as because this was several years ago, I opened one first and was assuming it was really expensive because
Yeah.
I had before Christmas morning, I had seen the bill or something, I had found out how much it was and was like, "Wow, Apple Watches are expensive." So then when I opened mine, I was like, "Oh, no, I don't want a gift this expensive," but it was like $150.
That's so
I thought it
funny.
was like 2 grand.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, guys. So let's dive into some awesome stuff you can learn from Aubrey's answer. The way that she introduced it was really great. So, telling a story from the past, right? A really funny thing happened several years ago. That is such a great introduction phrase to something that's actually interesting and funny, right? And then you quoted yourself talking to the guy at the Apple store, and you were like, and I said, "Kind sir, can you please give me an Apple Watch?" So saying, kind sir instead of like sir or excuse me. That's really native and natural, very funny, very
Like putting
uncommon.
myself in a British novel.
Yeah, exactly. And then time phrase, transition. Christmas morning comes. So instead of saying, and then on Christmas morning, you just give the time and say comes, right? Christmas morning comes and then you say what happened.
Mm.
Um, and instead of saying he was shocked, you said a look of shock passed over his face. So it's just so descriptive. It's so excellent. And passive and vocab note here. You said we were dumbfounded by the cost. So dumbfounded is like very shocked, right? But there's the passive there. We were dumbfounded by the cost. And then instead of saying like I don't notice or I don't care about these things. You're like, what do I care? And it struck me that is an interesting grammar construction that students never
Mm.
use, right? So instead of saying, like, I don't care, I don't know about this, just say, what do I care?
Oh, yes, that's really fun. I say that a lot, I think. It's not only is it more fun and, if this kind of thing on the IELTS exam, I feel is so much less common that it really stands out for the examiner, right? Vocab, fluency, like,
Totally.
I notice when a student uses a phrase like that.
Oh, 100%, 100%. All right, guys. So we hope that you practice your answers to today's questions. And we want to share a recent poll that we did because this is the first time we've seen a poll get like exactly 50-50.
Yeah, this was a fun one. The poll question was, do you always read the fine print? We talked about business a little bit and how you can talk about business on IELTS in 1455, formal contract phrases for IELTS business topics. We talked about the fine print, the tiny lettering on contracts that we often don't read, especially when there's 30 pages of it.
Yeah. And half of you said yes, and half of you said no. I'm just shocked that half of you said yes.
Yeah, right, and it
I mean,
probably is
good
like
on you.
they wanted a depends probably because maybe they read it for some things if they're a couple pages, but
True.
if you go to purchase a home and it's like 400 pages of fine print, I'll be amazed if those yeses still read every word.
I know. All right, guys. So remember that we post a Spotify poll for every single episode, and we love to read your answers. So if you are listening to us in Spotify, hit follow first, and then go ahead and answer that poll for today.
Yeah, we're going to ask, do you have a favorite piece of clothing? I'm curious. It'll
Awesome.
just be yes or no, but definitely think about this for IELTS. I, for one, would have a difficult time. I would definitely need that minute to think. What do
Right?
I have a
Yeah.
favorite piece? I don't have a fur coat to talk about.
I don't think a lot of people talk about one piece of
No.
clothing for 2 minutes. So definitely something to practice, guys.
And another note here, I was thinking about this when I first read that question. I think I would have a tendency to talk about maybe sweaters in general, hoodies or like
Mm.
yoga pants. But if it is saying describe your favorite piece of clothing, it's talking about one article of clothing that you could describe and talk about. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Might trip some of you up.
That's a very good note, guys. Every part 2 is gonna ask you one thing, one person, one
Describe
event,
one thing.
right? So it's all gonna be singular. Good. Awesome. Good tip. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll be back again next week.
Awesome. See you next week.